Once I discovered neuroplasticity, I thought, I wish I'd known about this when I was 18.
Really?
You know, it's literally life-changing. I think I was naturally manifesting from about the age of 18 anyway, but I didn't understand the science behind it. Once you understand that you can literally change your brain at any stage, any age, any mindset, it's life-changing, isn't it? And I feel that, you know, one of the things we were sort of chatting about earlier is that just because I'm a scientist and an MD, it doesn't mean that in my real life, it's easy for me to just channel neuroplasticity. It's still hard. You know, I've been through a divorce, I've been through grief, I've been through career change. And those hard times taught me resilience and neuroplasticity. But the hard times were almost the opportunity. I didn't want to go through those things. You can take that as an opportunity. And I think if you really understand neuroplasticity, then you can make the worst times in your life the start of the best time in your life. And that's what I love about neuroplasticity, that it's that ability to change, to grow, to regulate your emotions, which I know you're really into, and build resilience.
Number 1, manifest your dreams.
An example of neuroplasticity that I would share with you, with our listeners, is gratitude lists. So for years in my journaling, I would write 10 things I'm grateful for every day. And they were always external things, friends, family, travel, you know, financial freedom, whatever. And I literally just got bored of writing the same things. So I thought, okay, what else could I write? So I started writing things like my creativity, my vulnerability, my resilience, internal things. And that was a real game changer.
Really? What happened when you started doing that?
It made me think that whatever life throws at me, I've got the tools and resources within me to deal with it. And I didn't always have, you know, in my 20s, I wouldn't say I was very emotionally regulated, but learning that whatever happens, the sort of the pendulum swing for your emotions, the higher it goes, the lower it goes as well, and bringing that to like parameters that you're comfortable with is that gives you sort of autonomy and agency in life.
Sure.
And again, that's the thing I love about neuroplasticity.
Number 2, think positively.
Abundance is basically about thinking positively. It's about believing that the world is a good place, that there's enough out there for everyone, that we're not in competition for resources, and that if somebody else does well, that doesn't mean badly for us. That if we give something to someone or help someone with something, that's a good thing, that it generates more positivity, and that somehow, you know, that will come back to you at some point. And interestingly, it correlates to the strongest gearing of the brain that we have for our survival as a species, which is called loss aversion.
Yes.
So that means that the psychological effect of avoiding loss is about twice as powerful as the psychological effect of the equivalent gain or reward. And the easiest way to explain that is if you walked from the parking lot to your studio this morning and you found $50 on the floor on your way in, you'd be probably pleasantly surprised that you found $50. You might keep it, you might give it to charity. But by the time you're in the studio and you've started thinking about recording, you would have forgotten about that $50. If you walked from your car across the parking lot and realized by the time you got to the studio that you'd lost $50 out of your pocket, you'd be mad at yourself. You'd go back out to the parking lot to see if you could find it. You might even go back out there more than once to check. And you might still be thinking about that at the end of the day. So that's just an example of how the same loss or gain has more powerful effect if we lose. And so psychologically, anything like feeling excluded or isolated or treated unfairly or feeling like you don't have the same opportunities as somebody else has that really strong effect on your brain. And so we have to work doubly hard to go against that, because it is something that helped us to survive in evolution, but I was going to say it's not helpful in the modern world, but to be honest, I will say it's not a way to live a life. It's a very, because I believe the way you think determines your life. If you believe that everybody's out there in competition, there isn't enough out there for everyone, that you've got to like fight to get your bit. That would just be such a sad way to live.
Number 3, seek motivation.
A strong negative motivator gets us into action. Sometimes a really strong positive one will do that too, but not as strongly as a negative motivator. So I'm thinking, for example, when I had my wedding come up and I wanted to look a certain way and for the whole wedding to feel a certain way, I did a lot of things I wouldn't normally do to try to make sure that happened, but that was unusual. And I remember thinking then, okay, this is a really positive motivator, but most of the time we do things to avoid a perceived loss, or we do things because things have gone wrong for us and we need to try to make it better. And actually that is very explained by science, because one of the strongest gearings of our brain from evolution is called loss avoidance. And the brain is 2 to 2.5 times as primed to avoid loss as it is to get a reward.
Number 4, be intentional.
The sort of the intentionality of what you do. So you can do the same thing. Like, okay, so intermittent fasting is a great example. Yeah. There's a huge difference between people who say, oh, I forget to eat breakfast, and people who eat like me, which is only between 12 noon and 8 p.m. every day, because of the intention. It actually has a different effect on your body. Yeah.
So it's like your body's like burning more because you're intentionally doing that, or you're losing more weight or something? I
won't go so far as to say it's burning more or you're losing more weight, but again, in neuroscience, there's a difference between intentional mind wandering and just slipping off into daydreaming. And so if you slip off into daydreaming, that means your attention isn't the best, and it's actually kind of a bad sign in terms of your focus and your concentration. But if you intentionally let your mind wander, then actually that leads to more creative thinking.
Number 5, rewire your brain.
The longer we have been experiencing something, the more deeply entrenched it is in our brain. And that's why the neural pathways that relate to things like the values that we hold, the roles that we play in our family and social circle, how boundaried we are or not, the expectations that we place on ourselves, and the secrets that we keep, can be so deeply embedded in the neural architecture of our brains that we're not really aware of how much they drive our behaviour. So essentially, these are subconscious or non-conscious beliefs that drive our thinking processes and then drive the actions that we take in the real world. The good news is that through neuroplasticity, you can choose sustainable new behaviours that will overwrite those old neural pathways that you have in your brain. It's important to remember that neuroplasticity can work for good or for bad, so you also need to be so mindful of what you're exposing your brain to. Everything you see on the TV, read in the news, the people that you meet, and the emotions that you experience and the thoughts that you let go round and round in your brain. Now, there's a process for embedding sustainable behaviour change in your brain, and that starts with raised awareness. So you really have to bring from non-conscious to conscious what it is that's driving your behaviours and thinking processes at the moment. You can do that through meditation, journaling, therapy, or just talking to good friends. Once you've identified what might be holding you back from success, what barriers you may be placing in front of yourself, or just old patterns of thinking and behaviour that no longer serve you, you can start to focus attention on certain situations or relationships where these behaviours tend to show themselves up. At first, it's important just to notice where you could have done something differently, rather than jumping straight into action. Once you've spent some time reflecting on this, and you have a few good examples of ways that you think or behave that you'd like to change, you can start the third step of deliberate practice, which is choosing a new way of behaving, or choosing a new thought or positive affirmation or mantra that you can use to overwrite old, unhelpful thought patterns, and then deliberately practicing these actions and thoughts until they become so strongly embedded in your brain that they become the default pathway for your brain to send energy along. The more you repeat something and the more emotional intensity there is associated with it, the more likely the neurons are to wire together and form new neural pathways that make you the new you and give you the best life that you can have. And this is really from the root level up. It's not superficial behaviour change, it's changing the way that you now do things. The final part of that process is about accountability. We all have so many good intentions, but we don't always see them through. And that's why an app like Living Ashram or a buddy that you're going through this behaviour change process with really helps you to be much more successful than if you just have vague thoughts about changing a way of being or acting. The evidence from really committing to a behaviour change like this is so strong that even the field of research around epigenetics, which is the effect of the environment on your genes, shows that if you think in a different way, act in a new way, give up lifestyle behaviours that are actually holding you back from being the best self that you can be, things like stress, smoking, drinking, not exercising, eating badly, that you can actually change the expression of your genes. So we all have parts of our genes that can be switched on or off. So even if we have certain likelihoods of getting certain diseases or living to a certain age, through our thoughts and our behaviours, we can change some of those outcomes. Pretty incredible. One way to approach this is through positive visualisation. So you can visualise yourself healthy and well, and you can really take that to the core of you and see yourself exhibiting these good behaviours and visualise the outcome that that would have for you in the future. Another way of priming your brain to make sure that you stay accountable to these goals that you really want to reach is to create what I call an action board. Now, this is like a vision board. It's a collage of images, metaphorical or literal, that represent all the things that you really want in life. But the scientific part says that you also have to take goal-orientated action towards making these things come true. You can't just sit at home and fantasize about them coming true. So if you create an action board, you look at it every day, you visualize it coming true, and you take the actions, whether it's from the brain-body connection actions that you committed to, or something to do with a longer, more sustainable behaviour change, and you keep doing them, you'll see the results rolling in. And this really comes back to Living Ashram's motto of root level up, whole human approach to health, wealth and well-being. So it's about really committing and seeing that through in every aspect of your body, your thoughts, your emotions, and your spirit.
Number 6, control your awareness.
Threats have changed from physical to psychological or social. Although that threat also existed because we could only really thrive as part of a tribe in the cave. And that was literally for physical warmth as well as affection and, looking after each other's children and sharing responsibilities. Now, there aren't as many, in that way anyway, physical threats to our safety or our life, but the social threat of being rejected, being lonely, being abandoned, that's still very, very strong in our wiring. And then other things, because obviously now we have money, for example, that the idea of losing your job, losing your lifestyle, those have become, sort of potential social threats to your safety as well. And, there's so many more. But I would say that financial and relational have become the biggest threats to our safety. So I think obvious examples of that are staying in a relationship where you're not really happy, but you think, well, it's better than being single again, kind of thing. And because that wiring has been there for so long, and of course in Lacey's work, she talks about wiring that has been there since childhood for us as individuals. And we have, made it very clear that the longer an issue has been there, the harder it is to bring it from subconscious to conscious and then deal with it. This is even beyond that. This is for generations and millennia. So it's a very strong default. And it's really every decision that you make is based on, is the world a safe place? Can I do this and still be healthy and happy? And
you mentioned a specific, which is not watching the news. Well, I don't know any neuroscientist that I'm friends with who watches the news. And that's the reason, because we're wired to default to loss aversion. If we continually tell our brain that there's danger out there, there's bad people out there, there's accidents out there, you will not want to take the healthy risks that you could to make your life better because you're too aware of the possible dangers.
Number 7, master your emotions.
Do you remember I mentioned I mentioned 6 ways of thinking. I may not have classified them as the brain agility model. You said, what's the source? And I said, it's your fully integrated brain power. And so I put that into 6 categories, which are mastering your emotions, knowing yourself, which is the brain-body connection, trusting your gut, which is intuition, making good decisions. It's logic. Logic has to be in there, but it's just one of the 6. Staying motivated and resilient to reach your goals. And then the final one, which is kind of the culmination of those 5, is creating the life that you desire. So in that model, I talk about using all of the different ways that you have to think to manifest real world outcomes. But I'd also like to say at this point that I was one of those people who was told at school that I wasn't creative because I wasn't good at art. And so I wanted to
My headmaster, or no, brother John, was it? It was a Varian Catholic high school, sent me to the headmaster saying I couldn't possibly be this bad at art. I must be painting this way just to piss him off.
Oh. And look what you've created, right?
I'm still shake, though, if you give me a paintbrush. And someday I will get to challenge myself on that. But that, like the root beer, is still in me.
Well, do you remember that quote from the book? If somebody tells you you can't paint, by all means paint.
Yes.
So I think, I want to give that to you as a gift. But yeah, I mean, things like that stay with you for ages. If you're like 11 and you're told that you're not creative, I believed I wasn't creative till I was 35. I fully believed I was not creative. And all my friends are creative in the obvious sense of the word. And I sort of thought, isn't it strange how all my friends are creative, but I'm not? And there were a few friends that said, but you are. But I was so shut off to believing that that was true that I didn't even question it or say, what do you mean? Or, explore it. So for me, there was like a bang kind of, a crisis moment that changed everything. But one of the reasons I wrote The Source is that it shouldn't have to be like that. We can all bring that into our lives without necessarily having a crisis. So I wanted to reframe creativity and just make it about creating your own life. And so manifestation is basically believing that you have more agency around creating, what you want in your life rather than that life just happens to you. I totally understand that it feels like that for people a lot of the time. And, I use this analogy where I say, if you're going on a car journey and would you rather be the person in the driving seat, choosing the destination and how you get there, or are you happy to be in the passenger seat and just be driven around, not know where you're going and the route that you take? And so for a lot of people, life can feel like you're in the passenger seat, and understanding neuroscience is about putting yourself in the driver's seat. So the manifestation part is how much can you contribute to actually bringing into your life the things that you really, really want? And so it's a bit of a gray area because to me, it overlaps with magnetic desire, which is something that you really, really, really want. So there has to be a strong emotional component to it. And then the actions that draw that into your life. So I'm not one of those people that says if you visualize something or make a vision board or, imagine an ideal future that you should just wait for it to come true because you thought about it. I'm very much about doing the actions that move, progress you towards that goal becoming true. And so the science around manifestation and magnetic desire and vision boards is a 3-step concept in the brain, which is selective attention, selective filtering, and value tagging. And basically, we're bombarded with so much information all the time, everything we smell, hear, see, everyone we meet, that the brain naturally filters most of that out and brings our attention to the things that are relevant for our survival and tags those things in order of importance. And there's both a logical and an emotional component to why certain things are important to us. So you can imagine if you're trying to hold down the day job, if you're trying to put food on the table, that filtering process happens quite automatically. And it's not thinking, what's the best thing that could ever happen to me in my life? How do I really want my life to look like in 5 years' time? It's not doing that. It's just doing, how do I survive like in the next short term? So paying attention to manifestation, and one of the mediums for doing that is a vision board, is a way of priming your brain to notice and grasp opportunities that might otherwise have passed you by.
Number 8, find a coach.
If your brain has seen something or experienced it through mental rehearsal, then when it comes across something similar in real life, it's less threatening. So uncertainty is the most threatening thing to your brain. Anything new is a huge threat to your brain, which is kind of counter to neuroplasticity, right? Because with neuroplasticity, I make myself do something new every year. So I've learned several languages.
Really?
Yeah.
How many languages do you know now?
I've learnt 5 in my life. I'm not going to pretend I'm fluent.
In all of them. Yeah. Are you fluent in any?
Yeah, so I was very lucky. I was brought up bilingual in English and an Indian language.
Okay.
And then from the age of 9, I learnt French at school.
Wow.
And then as an adult, I learnt 3 other languages at different times.
Gotcha.
Probably not so good at those ones. But, so during the pandemic, I actually made a statement in the beginning, which was, don't necessarily put pressure on yourself to like start a new career or learn a language. Then it went on for longer than we all thought it would. So I was actually on an Instagram live saying that I'd always wanted to learn the piano. And somebody sent me a DM and said, Dr. Tara, you can use the Flowkey app to teach yourself piano.
Flowkey, huh?
Yeah. It's a really, really cool app. And I'd been gifted a piano keyboard for Christmas by my husband. I am ashamed to say a year or 2 earlier and never used it. So in the pandemic, I did use the Flowkey app and teach myself.
Now you know how to play piano? More than Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star?
Exactly. Yeah. And my husband gave me tennis lessons. And then I thought, okay, if I can learn piano and I can learn tennis and I can see how much I improve and I can see the muscle memory from when I played tennis from when I was at high school, can I apply that to looking at life through a happier lens? So it's a natural default for all of us to, loss aversion is one of the biggest gearings of the brain and it's essential to survival.
Loss aversion.
Yeah, so avoiding loss. And uncertainty, like I said, we don't like that. So we like things to be safe, we like them to be the same, we like to know what's going to happen. And equally, the brain wants to look out for danger to protect us. And during the pandemic, I'd been speaking for a few years about having a sabbatical. And a few people said to me, oh, now you can have a sabbatical. And I said, I'm locked up at home. I can't travel. I can't see my friends. I can't hug my stepson. It's not a sabbatical. It's not the sabbatical I dreamed of. And also, the mental health requirements were so vast that I felt I had to do my piece and really, speak to that through Instagram, through Zoom, and try to help people. So I was actually busier with work than ever before.
Sure. Trying to help people, yeah.
But I did start, I saw a lot of relationship breakups. I saw a lot of people get sick. A lot of people that I personally knew died during the pandemic. And it was easy to start to feel like, to focus on things like you can't see people, you can't travel. And I didn't want to see myself go down that road. So I got a coach. I believe in having therapy, having coaching, having supervision.
Love it.
And I worked on that. And she actually said to me, why can't you apply neuroplasticity to being happier? And because it's intangible, it's you know, you can make a vision board with a house and, you know, a dream holiday and vacation and all that
for the
kind of
material world.
Exactly.
But how do you create one for the emotional world?
I think there are, and that's why imagery is important, because it can evoke a feeling.
Yes.
But I remember the moment I was standing sort of at the door to my garden and a really small, nice thing had happened. And I thought, isn't that lovely? And I actually checked myself and I thought, I notice when something goes wrong all the time. I don't always acknowledge when something goes right or is really good and happy. And so I could tell that I had changed, that I was noticing those things.
You didn't notice that before?
I mean, I'm sure I did sometimes with like big things.
Number 9, practice gratitude.
We've developed an appreciation for things that we may have taken for granted before. So I have been, in lockdowns, I've been with one other person, and it has certainly made me think. At first, I was like, well, if I'd been on my own, I would have been fine. But as the months drag on and as it happens again and again, my heart just is so out there for people who've been through that on their own. That is not a healthy state for us. And so a lot of the work I've done in the last year is to encourage people to bathe rather than shower, because immersing yourself in warm water releases the same bonding hormones that you get from physical affection from a loved one. To massage your own body, to do gratitude practices that involve self-touch. So a lot more, being a lot more proactive about the fact that you maybe have been isolated alone, but also even with one affectionate person or, 2 or 3 affectionate people in your family, it's normal in a day to go out and shake hands or hug or kiss like 8 to 12 people. And so that happens and you don't even really think about it. And they say that you need 8 hugs a day just to sort of stay mentally stable and 20 hugs a day to grow as a person who feels healthy and happy and they can take some risks. So I think suddenly demanding 20 hugs a day from one person is probably,
Number 10, learn to forgive.
I think we've said a lot. There's one thing that I didn't write about in the book as much as I would have liked to, and that's forgiveness. And actually, you reminded me about that by talking about Hawaii. And because I did some research into the Ho'oponopo when I was writing the book, I'm sure you know.
All-time favorite.
Yeah, I'm sure you know about it way better than me, and I don't want to, to do it a disjustice. But when I struggled with forgiveness, I asked so many people. I read about it. I, listened to meditations, and a version of the Hawaiian forgiveness meditation was what really worked for me. So it's very simple. The version that I do is to think of the person that you're struggling to forgive and say, thank you, I love you, I'm sorry, I forgive you, I release you. But you have to keep saying it until you mean it, and it can be hard at times. But when you get there, it changes your life.
The scientific version of that really is that the way that you think determines what happens in your life. And again, it's something I've been speaking about for so long, but it's more crucial than ever now, because it's so easy to think negatively now. It's so easy to feel down, to feel out of control, to hear what everybody else is saying and just get swept up in that. And that's why things like the journaling and the affirmation and the action board are so important, because they can really help to keep you focused on the fact that the way that you think is going to make the difference between surviving and thriving. And again, hopefully we all have a bit more time now to really do what's called metacognition, which is think about our thinking. So not just let the outside world happen to us, but take more agency over the way that we think and react to things. So finally, I just wanted to say that what the science really points at with all those tips behind us is that your mental resilience, or your inner strength, whatever you like to call it, is the key differentiator in terms of how people are going to deal and cope even in the same circumstances. So, there's you that will struggle with something, and then there's the best you that will get through it, that will inspire others, and will come out feeling better and stronger. And I believe in that you, and the science really backs it up. So please believe that you're remarkable, that you can do things that you never thought you could do before. And let's all do it together in community.